Okay, everybody, we're going to get started with this Crushing Doubt Q&A very shortly. I'm just going to get my Instagram going, and then we will get up and running, get to your questions, and get them answered. And I will talk about why that is so important. Okay, we got our Instagram going. So welcome to Crushing Doubt's Q&A. It's every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern now. That is our new setup, which I think has been going well for everybody, including me, so I appreciate that. But very excited to be here with you to talk about mind-body issues. So, of course, let's talk about why I do this and what it is that we're doing. Mind-body issues are symptoms that begin with thinking or feeling. Anything that's going on in your mind can change anything that can happen in the body. If the body can do it, the mind can use it. And why do I do these Q&As? Well, as many of you know, or really most of you will know, I suffered from 8 years of chronic everyday back pain. I did not think I was going to get better. I didn't understand these concepts much at all. I knew the concept that the mind could cause symptoms. What I didn't know is just how far it went. And it's been incredibly eye-opening as I've studied this for 14 years since. But I was able to stop that 8-year bout with terrible, terrible pain, disabling me entirely, altering my life throughout for 8 long years with no sense I was going to get better once I discovered the books of Dr. John Sarno. And so this is the man who saved my life writing those books. But I will say I also did some real work on my own to continue to save my life and to get further. And I think this is true for a lot of people who read Dr. Sarno. He gives them the crucial information. He was just brilliant in all kinds of ways, including in his certainty about why you're okay and how you can get better. But a lot of times people wanted more details, and I certainly wanted more details. And I needed to investigate it for myself. I needed things to align with my understanding of what had happened to me and what it actually felt like to have the symptoms myself. So I began working with people once I got better. Once I got the right information, it changed what was going on in my brain, which changed what was going on in my body. The muscles calmed down. I believed I could get better, and then I did get better. And belief is the key. This is why what I do is called crushing doubt, because if you have doubts that you can get better, your body stays in that same setup. And in fact, that's a key variable about how doubt applies to your experience, which is that if your thinking doesn't change, your physiology doesn't change. So a huge part of this Q&As is to get you answers to questions that will change your thinking, which then changes the symptoms. Now, one reason that I do these Q&As is I found this out the hard way. When I discovered Dr. Sarno, I had all kinds of questions still. And one of the things that I decided to do is go see somebody who had trained under Dr. Sarno. It was a psychologist, Eric Sherman. Great guy, great therapist. And he really knew Dr. Sarno's work inside and out. And I found it was so important to get those questions answered. So when I read Dr. Sarno, I didn't instantly get better. I had to get information. I sat down with Eric in one session and asked him probably about 200 questions that had been built up over the 8 years of time and in the time I was reading Dr. Sarno. And all of those answers helped me. They all changed my mindset, and they all led to the flow of kind of reversing the negative feedback loop that I was having with my mind and body of worrying about that I was injured or I wasn't going to get better. And all of the bad things that was doing in my body, reversible things, benign things, but really bad from an experiential standpoint, and started moving in a positive direction. So that's what we're here to do. Now, I'll say one last thing before we dive into questions. When I answer these questions, I answer them from the framework that I've developed over the 14 years of working with and helping thousands of people with these issues. I have a book, I have a seminar, I have a website, which is www.crushingdoubt.com. I run groups, and the whole idea is getting you the right information. My goal is not to make you like me or to do things the way that I do them. My goal is to get you to feel that you can understand what's happening, why you can get better, and how you can get better. And what I did is I took Dr. Sarno's brilliant work and I expanded it into everything that I find helpful, not just for me, but in all the work that I've done with people. So when I answer these questions, I'm answering it from the vantage point of what I call the columns system. And the columns get their name from the fact that I used to have people, when they would come in for consultations for me, divide a sheet of paper into 3 columns to show the 3 different ways that the mind affects the body. So I'll break it down in very simple terms, but we can get into the details as people desire. The emotions column is really just what it sounds like in a way. It's about feeling. It's about your feeling. But here's what people don't know about the emotions column right up front, which is that the emotions column describes what happens for people when they have onsets or upticks in symptoms. Right at the beginning, when that symptom starts, or when a symptom suddenly goes up or suddenly goes down, it's emotional in nature. However, that doesn't describe what happens, like with my back pain, when symptoms are just there and they don't seem to be budging. Well, that's not because of emotion. And I needed to understand this. And even Dr. Sarno, as brilliant as he was, didn't lay this out. I needed to figure this out for myself. It was the thinking that was driving the symptoms to stay and to stay exactly as they were, because nothing was changing in my thinking. Fear is the strongest form of doubt. And when we're having fear, it's very hard to even think straight at all, let alone think differently. And those symptoms tend to be very, very perpetually there. So we've got to bring down fear to break up what I call seemingly chronic symptoms. I never use the word chronic because nothing's chronic unless it is related to a very, very clear medical and very serious medical issue. And that's extremely rare and applies to almost none of the symptoms you're ever going to have in your whole life. Could even apply to none of them. In fact, I'm trying to think back. I have very few symptoms that did not turn out to be mind body. I mean, sure, I had COVID at one point. I had pneumonia at one point. These things weren't mind body, but most of my symptoms always were mind body. We'll keep talking about that. Now, we've got the emotions column related to feeling and the doubt column related to thinking. The power column is the third column. And I discovered that this didn't relate to the onsets and upticks in symptoms so much. This didn't relate to symptoms that won't budge, very stubborn symptoms like the doubt column. This related to plateaus of symptoms where I'd gotten better to a certain point, but then I just wasn't getting past that. And it turns out, as I studied this relates to conflicts with the self. So the power column is about working out your self relationship. Very simply put, the emotions column is feelings for onsets and upticks in symptoms. The doubt column is thinking for seemingly chronic symptoms. And the power column is your self relationship for those symptom plateaus, meaning the symptoms have gotten a lot better, but not all the way. So stuck at a low level. Okay, now when I answer questions, it's going to be in that format. I'm going to be talking about these different columns and how to understand them and making some recommendations about what to do. Let me first say hi to some people, then we'll dive into some questions. Laura Brown, thank you for joining us here. Ani, thank you for joining us. Ani is a coach in the field who I've trained. Rita as well, another coach in the field that I've trained. Both are excellent, and I will be recommending people when they want to work individually. I tend to send them to people that I've trained because I work primarily with group work, and I will talk about that shortly when I get into some of the resources available on my website. Rita says, hi, Dan and Crushing Out crew. Good to see you, Rita. Ani said, hey, Dan and community. Thank you, Ani. Okay, it's me, Jim has joined us here on Instagram. Thanks for joining us here. And Michael Dalby, thank you for joining us here as well. Hopefully I'm saying names correctly. I apologize if I did not. Kasim says, hi, Dan and everyone on YouTube. Good to see you, Kasim. And Susan says, hi, Dan and our Crushing Out family. I love when people use these terms. Community, family, crew, whatever it is. It's very fond. Teresa says, hi, Dan and Crushing Out family as well. Good to see you. And Beatrice, thanks for saying hello as well. All right. Now let's get into some questions. And what I want to encourage you is when you're listening to these questions, try to think of each conversation as useful to you. Of course, you want to get your specific question answered. But at the same time, every question I'm answering, I'm going to be trying to fold it into the overall system of these 3 columns, how to understand them and what to do with them. It's all about changing your thinking, and a lot of that can be done in a very proactive way. So let's get into it. Kasim, I got your messages. Hopefully you saw my answer on the community website, which, by the way, my membership groups, you can come see me on these Zoom calls, and we get even further with any question and answers because there's a lot of information that we can get from each other right then and there. But in addition, there's a community site where people can ask written questions and get responses, usually day of, but sometime within the next day or two. John Fittisway, thank you for joining us here on Instagram. Okay, Kasim says, I'm coming up to the anniversary of the initial concussion. Wow. My question is, what role does an anniversary of a traumatic event or injury have on symptom increases? Okay, that's a great question. And Kasim, I know you're having a big uptick right now. Hopefully you did get my response, and my primary response to it is that big uptick is happening because your doubt is going way up, especially in the form of fear. And when it comes to anniversary responses, this is a great question because it's going to vary for people, but there's something important I can say to everybody. It's not at all atypical for people to have anniversary responses because they're reminded of that time of year. The way the air feels is a similar type of year. You're in a yearly cycle with yourself, and your brain remembers everything. There's an expression in psychology that the unconscious knows all. And one of the things it knows is what time of year is it? And it remembers everything. So naturally, this would be on your mind. Now, for some people, it doesn't end up being as big of a deal because maybe they've settled it more. Kasim, 5 years from now, that anniversary reaction may not do anything to you. 1 year from now, hopefully, it's not going to do anything to you. But could it be doing something now? Absolutely. Anything that brings something to your mind and gets that process going can activate symptoms. It can remind you of that emotional time, and then that emotional experience can lead to an onset or an uptick. Boom, there it is. It can lead to doubt. Oh my God, you're marking the time. It's been a year since that. I remember what that was like. Or maybe it's been 2 years. I can't remember what the time frame is. But the longer it goes, the more room doubt has to be like, I don't know. This has been taking a long time. And at the same time, doubt can also lose every single battle because you can also say, well, it's been that long. There's no way this is anything but mind body. My main point is this. It's going to depend on how you take it in. So what role does an anniversary play? It could play a huge role if you don't have that locked down and under control. And it also can play no role if you do have it well under control. So, Kasim, let's do follow-up. As always in these Q&As, that's just my first answer. The way I think about columns work or mind-body work as I see it is that these are all conversations. We don't just say one thing and then we're done, usually, unless we really put it to rest very well. A lot of the time, what we want you to be thinking about is this is a conversation, ongoing conversation where you get your mind into a better spot overall. Now, I'll say one thing about the groups. They are available on my website, www.crushingdoubt.com. These groups, first of all, they're incredibly cost effective. They are $100 per month. And I meet with people 3 times a week. And these meetings are up to 2 hours long. So you're talking about 6 hours a week, 24 hours a month for $100. And you're getting information, not just from when I'm talking to you, but when I'm talking to each person. And we get really deep into it. If I were talking to Kasim about this anniversary reaction in group, I'd be asking him, well, how are you feeling about it? What's coming up? I'd know the details. He'd be able to ask me questions and details. So he'd be able to get in like 4 or 5 questions in the one round of just talking to me. So these groups are incredibly valuable, and we're getting great results. Actually, I've had people say to me like, a lot of people in the group are struggling, but I don't hear about people doing well. Why? Because they graduate, they get better, and they get back to their lives. The goal isn't to be in group the whole time or to be in there for long periods of time. Now, for some, they got to work at it for a while. It can take a while. It all depends on when your mind clicks into place. But when it happens, it can happen fast. We just had a group member who's had been in groups, I would say probably for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, and it clicked hugely. And she was like, I think I'm done. I'm okay. I got my life back. So if you want to talk to me about this, you can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.com, and or just come see me. And typically when people come to groups, the best thing is if they've read the book or done my seminar, which is pre-recorded videos to teach about mind-body experience. That way you come in primed to ask those questions you need. Anyways, enough about the resources, but please do let me know if you have any questions about it. I'm going to say hi to a couple other people. Ice, good to see you. Ice is in my basketball league. Really good to see you here, Ice. Joey Bork, thanks for joining us here. Connect and Self, good to see you again. It's been a while. And Marie Llewellyn, thanks for coming back as well. All right, let's keep going with questions. The key is always asking the right questions and getting the answers you need. Okay, Myra. Myra says, hi, Dan. Can something caused by mind-body sometimes need medical treatment? I have trigeminal autonomic cephalagia, headache type, started during high stress. All images show healthy brain. Doubt is high. Okay. I'm going to give you my first answer, Myra. Then I want you to follow up as needed. Mind-body issues almost never require medical treatment in the end. And it doesn't sound like yours would at all. We can get into why, and I'll talk more about it. But what happens in mind-body experience typically is all of these symptoms are benign and reversible. They're not going to harm you. And they do come from the mind and become real in the body. But they're usually operating on systems that can change all the time. A great example is blushing or crying. You have an emotion and the blood flow changes your face with embarrassment, or with your crying if it's sadness or sometimes happiness. Actual tears roll down your face, but those don't last all the time, right? However, that same mind-body process, if your emotions stay the same or your thinking stays the same, that could just continue. And when that happens, it doesn't do you harm because most of the system it's operating on are totally reversible. You're never going to have any problems. That includes the nerves, by the way. The only exception to that is when there is extremely, extremely high stress and the person isn't aware of it, and it usually relates to trauma. Now, very unprocessed trauma at extremely high levels can lead to autoimmune attacks. I'll give you a very strong piece of evidence of this. You don't have this, though, Myra. So let's get that out of the start. I'll jump back to you in a second. But there's a study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And this, in many ways, is one of the most important studies in the history of science. What it shows is that people who have high levels of emotional trauma, these adverse, especially in childhood, adverse childhood experiences, which are defined as things like sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, death of a parent, parental incarceration, substance abuse in the home, very traumatic things. Very high levels of poverty is another one that's associated with this. And what they found in this experiment, which included 17,000 people, this was done in 1999, I believe. It's been replicated in many ways. And what they found is that people with even just one adverse childhood experience, let alone multiple, had a higher incidence of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. So can mind-body issues lead to autoimmune issues? The answer is pretty definitively yes. However, most of you are not going to be in any danger if you're doing the work of processing. It's unprocessed emotions that tend to lead to those kinds of things. That's what the literature seems to suggest, and certainly is in my experience. So, when I think about your question, Myra, let's pull this back up. Your question is like, I have trigeminal autonomic cephalagia. Okay, that's not the kind of thing that is an autoimmune thing that needs to be treated medically. So, and you're showing all signs of a healthy brain. That's all pointing in the direction to this is mind body. This can all be reversed 100%. Now, as I often say, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. So I've just given you information. I've given you my answer, but it's not going to make any dent until it changes how you think. So let's engage about that. Come back to me. Tell me what you're thinking about it, and we'll go from there. All right. Dorisa says, how do feelings fit into your column system? I found out I was thinking emotions and not feeling them in my body. Beautiful question, Dorisa, and really an important way of thinking about things. So feelings, of course, fit into the emotions column. But I like what you said here, and it's really important for us to think about that you can be thinking about feelings That's not feeling them. So the emotions column, these onsets and upticks happen when we're not aware, when we are not aware of the emotional experience. And Teresa, I think that's basically what you're saying. You've been thinking about your feelings, but you haven't been feeling your feelings. And so actually, it's interesting. You said, I'm not feeling them in my body. In a way, I think you are feeling them, but only in your body. Your body's feeling them for you. And this is one of the reasons why getting in touch with emotions brings us awareness, and that awareness can knock out all of these acute symptoms very quickly. We can get very deep and big and broad control over our acute symptoms by recognizing those feelings. And I don't mean just recognizing them as how we think about them. I mean feeling them. When you bring them to the surface, they're no longer unconscious. They no longer need to be expressed in the body. So that's how it fits into my column system, Teresa, is that not only is that true, that gaining that awareness can bring down those acute symptoms, but my emotions column is designed to help you know how to do that. Here's an example. One of the main things that I do in the emotions column is help people build out what I call an emotional themes menu. And that is where you create a list of all the things in your life that bother you the most emotionally. What does that do for you? What it allows is when you're having an onset or an uptick in a symptom, you can go down that checklist. You can look at it directly, or you can just have it in your mind. And you'll be able to locate, it's like a shorthand to be able to locate what's the one that's really bothering me here. And so it's a shortcut to get actual access to the emotions. And just having that information can get you in touch with, oh yeah, that's really real. And by the way, as we make more progress and we get more in touch with these things, it becomes even easier to unearth these things. Teresa, let's do follow-up as needed. Okay, Mike/Webb. His last name is Webster, so he goes by Webb. Good to see you, Mike. Mike is also a coach in the field, but he has some formal training as well. I trained him in my system. He's excellent also. If you guys are interested in seeing people individually, I've got lots of people to send you to. If you're interested in working with me directly, the groups are the way to go. I also wanted to say there are the general groups that are those Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday times. And you can find those times on my website, but I'll give them to you here. Mondays, it's from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Tuesdays is from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern. And Wednesdays is from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern. I changed that time recently. But I tried to give times that work all across the world because I work virtually and everybody needs help. And I've got an international following that really, I've helped people all over the world. So these times mean everybody should be able to come at certain points. So Webb, thanks for joining us here. Catherine Toomer, thank you for joining us on Instagram as well. Okay, Susan said, I felt great after our group yesterday, but I had the really bad nighttime burning pain. Can you, let's see. I felt great after our group yesterday and still had the nighttime burning pain really bad. Can you demonstrate your emotional themes, please? Okay, sure. So this is, because it's an onset or an uptick, as Susan's pointing out, this is exactly when you would use the emotions column and dip into that. So Susan, let me actually say this about the flow of the work. The flow of the columns work is you bring down the doubt. That's first, because you can't see anything when doubt's in the picture. It clouds everything. And what you need to be able to do is bring that doubt down so you can see what's underneath. What's underneath is usually an emotional experience. So we bring down doubt, learn about the emotions, and then we flow into power, which is when we decide what do we do with all that emotional awareness. The power column is an emotional column, but it's where we actually take action, make some adjustments. So Susan's talking about the fact that her doubt generally is low enough that she can start to do this emotions column work. She felt great in the group, but then suddenly had an onset of pain in the night, which is actually very common for her. And what I've said to her is that's because at night, she's got a very active emotional life that she doesn't fully know about. So she wants me to demonstrate these emotional themes. Now, Susan, I won't know what themes apply for you until we have that emotional map, the themes menu. So we're going to do that, and we'll do it in group starting next week. But what I can do is tell you some of my emotional themes to give you an idea of them. And it's important that I say this. The emotional themes are not a set of emotions. It's not like anger does it, sadness does it, excitement does it. That's not it. It's the ideas that connect to the feeling. So, feeling disrespected, feeling invalidated, being gaslighted, not being trusted is a big one for me. Like I just don't like that. I feel like I'm trustworthy enough. Why can't you trust me? Now, I'm not saying that's any of that's rational or that other people have to abide by those things. I'm just saying I know the things that upset me. So, Susan, fairness is one of the themes that I think has come up for you. Maybe you felt that something was unfair. Maybe it's a theme about loss. Maybe it is thinking about some of the things you're going through recently as you're processing, mourning some real losses. I don't know which one it is, but what I want you to do is just make a list of all the things that bother you, generally speaking, worst in your life, and look at what do we think it might have been. Now, here's the places to look. In the emotions column, it's all about the timing. So you want to look at what was going on at the moment it happened. Now, if you're awoken from sleep, you may not be able to do that entirely, but if you were having a dream, the dream's going to relate to it. If you aren't aware of the dream, what you can do is go back to the day before, whatever was happening, and think about what were the events. Who did I see? Who did I talk to? What messages did I get? How was I feeling? What shows did I watch? Whatever you were feeling, that is going to get loaded into your dreams that day. So, Susan, we got to look for that. I don't know what it is, but you said, can you demonstrate your emotional themes? If I woke up from a dream, I'd be looking straight at, well, was I disrespected? Was I being gaslit? Or did I feel like I'm being unfairly blamed? These are all the kinds of things that fit my emotional themes menu. I'd be looking at them and seeing what applied from the day before or what applied in the dream. Susan, let's do follow-up from that. All right. By the way, if I miss any question, please just ask it again. I'm trying to catch every question I can, and I don't mean to skip anybody, so please let me know. Am Sunday, thank you for joining us here. Please do let me know if you have any questions. Let me make sure there aren't any coming in from Instagram that I've missed. Okay, Laura Brown has a question on Instagram. I want to make sure to get to that. So Laura said, hi, Dan. I wondered if you have seen anyone get better from tinnitus with this work. Absolutely. I've done it many times. I haven't had it before, and it came on suddenly a couple of weeks ago. It's now mainly there when I'm in a quiet place. Yes, Laura, I have worked with tinnitus before. I've even had tinnitus myself. I will say my tinnitus usually doesn't last very long. That's because my doubt is so low and I know what to do with it. But I've worked with people who had tinnitus in a seemingly chronic sort of way and broken it up entirely. I'll give you my number one recommendation with tinnitus. Don't be afraid that it's going to stay. It'll just go away. It really will. Now, the way I process tinnitus in my mind when it happens is I didn't want to hear something. That's literally what happens. Or words are ringing in my ears. The onsets and upticks of symptoms are emotions column events, but this is where body metaphors really matter. Onsets and upticks. When it's something with your ears, it is about not wanting to hear something, not liking what you heard. So that can help you locate, why did it start then? What was I feeling? But the key is to not let doubt take over. Even if you never get to the bottom of what was going on emotionally, you must not let doubt take over because it's like a relay race. And the emotions column doesn't run very far. It hands the baton to doubt very quickly. And then doubt is the marathon runner. It'll go and go and go and go. So Laura, what I would say is don't be afraid of it. It's just going to go away. You don't even need to figure out what the emotion was necessarily. If you want to dig for it, but don't worry about it. It's just going to go away. When we get to that spot and people aren't worried about it, even people who had it for a long time, it just goes away. That's what happens with everything with doubt. And that's why doubt is the linchpin of everything. That's why, even though there are 3 columns, my book is called Crushing Doubt. My podcast is called Crushing Doubt. It's because doubt is the most important when it comes to managing our symptoms in our lives, when it comes to physicality. Because emotions, they only lead to acute and onsets and upticks in symptoms. They'll come and go. They won't last if doubt doesn't take over. And power, it's great to live in alignment with yourself and have a better, much better life that way. But The primary thing we want is to not have chronic symptoms, because those are the ones that impact us all the time and dominate our lives. Okay. Laura, let me know if that answered your question. Okay, Kasim is doing some follow-up. It's been 3 years since the concussion. I thought that was about right. What you said resonates with me, especially around fear as time passes. Okay, so Kasim, I wanted to share with you, I have no doubt about this. And when I say that, I don't just mean I have no doubt that this is mind body. I also have no doubt that we are going to get rid of this. Not only that, but during that 3-year period, you don't always have these symptoms. You don't. So what that means is, when you're in a calmer place, we're going to be able to look at what's going on emotionally. And that's what we did in group, actually. We started looking at the emotions. We started looking at this theme of social connection and aloneness. I'm still certain that that's right in terms of why the onset happened. But when symptoms last more than a day or two, even, you know that doubt is starting to take over. Not only that, but when symptoms are really, really high, that only happens in 2 instances. Either there is an emotional thing that is ragingly huge that you're not aware of, and I don't think that's what's going on here, or fear has taken over. So let's talk about fear. Doubt comes in 4 different forms: fear, confusion, lack of certainty, and unanswered questions. Lack of certainty and unanswered questions are what I call the positive side of doubt. That's the area where we can really work with it. It's the area where we can say, if I knew this, I'd be better off. If I knew this, I'd believe I could get better more. That's the positive side of doubt. Fear and confusion, when you're in either one of those, that's the negative side of doubt. And it's not very workable. Ultimately, what you want to do is bring down the fear almost entirely with information. And you want to break up confusion with information. Information is the thing that's going to make you less afraid, more confident that you can get places, but it's also going to make your doubt more workable. So I'm glad it resonates with you. I'm right about it. Your fear has gone way up. And I think from an anniversary response, what you said makes sense about why. It's been 3 years, you're marking the time, and that made you more afraid. But it doesn't matter how long it takes. I don't mean that in an unsympathetic way. I'm very empathic to how long it takes. That having a symptom for half an hour is a problem, let alone years, or even just days or weeks. We don't want to have these symptoms. We want to get rid of them. So I have total empathy for it. But the reality is, we get afraid if we can't make sense of why they're here and why we can get better. We've got to be clear on that. So one of my roles, I have many roles with people, but one of my roles here is to help you see the role that doubt plays. And sometimes fear is the most important one to get to, because if we can reduce that, you're on the path to recovery. Even with confusion, that's better than fear. At least then you can work on, wait, why is this not making sense? Why am I not getting better? When you're in fear, you're not really asking that question. You're just like, I'm going to die. I can't make it out of this. I'm never going to be okay. Fear that's what it's like. And I think that this anniversary reaction, as we said, it can be a big deal for people at various times. I think for you it is, but you've got to remember, you've had tons of success, including with these very symptoms. When you went to that film festival and you thought you couldn't watch movies because it was bringing up that nauseated feeling, guess what? Last time we got you to watch almost all the movies. That doesn't happen if it's not mind body. Now I've got to keep hammering away at this. One of my roles is to be very forceful and strong against doubt. Of course, accurately so. It's got to be accurate, but I'm right about this. So let's see what it brings up in you and how you can combat your own fear. Because ultimately, I wish I could just do the work for you, because I could just take it away and people would be like, wow, he's magic and it helps so much. But in some ways it's better. Well, in a lot of ways it's better to make sure that you learn how to do it for you, because then you've got that with you everywhere you go all the time. I often say, like, if I'm the reason you're staying afloat, then you don't believe you can stay afloat on your own. And I think, Kasim, you've made huge progress in many other symptoms, even in this symptom. This is a bad set of moments. We are moment to moment beings. Your mind body experience changes moment to moment because we don't stay in the same place as people. Think about the thousands of different feelings and thoughts you have throughout one day. You can't stay in one place. What you can do instead, though, is know how to manage the flow. That's what we're going to keep doing. All right. Dark Ol 840, thank you for joining us here. And Joa Gomez, thank you for joining us on Instagram as well. Please do let me know if you guys have any questions. All right. Again, if I miss any questions, please just ask them again. I'll make sure to get to them. Okay, Karen Isaacs, good to see you here. Need to get used to new time. Hi, all. Glad we're back. Understandable, Karen. Yes, the earlier time just helps me manage family life better, so I appreciate the flexibility. And hopefully you guys are still getting what you need. All right. Karen says, I've been so joyous, symptom-free, pool, summertime. I want to be excited for fall, winter. It feels good. Literally feeling light, breezy. Beginning of summer, I was exhausted, saddish. It rained a lot in New York. I'm definitely affected by the weather and the seasons. Okay, a lot of people can be. The good news is this is all an internal experience, actually. Like if our brains weren't processing things, we wouldn't even notice whether it's winter or not. Like an ant doesn't get depressed about, your ant might, but ants, the bug, they don't get depressed about winter. I'm almost certain of that. I guess I don't totally know, but they don't have that consciousness to have that experience. So Karen, my feeling is we need to not buy into doubt there also. In a way, doubt is whispering to you saying, oh, you can be happy in the summer, but you can't at those other times, which I think is why you're bringing this up. You know what I'm talking about. So what we can do is find different ways to be happy at different times, different ways to feel cheered. I think what happens with winter is we're all reminded of mortality. The trees don't even have their leaves. It gets darker. It can feel dark. But the good news is we can alter that. And if you think about it, we do this all the time. We build a fire, or we recognize that it's cozy. Oh, we don't have to go anywhere. Or maybe we like the seasons, but we've got to find a way to feel good. And the power column is the place that we do that. But the flow of things is bring down doubt, learn about emotions, flow into power. So if you're having doubts as to whether you can be happy at other times than the summer, the way I would think about it is, well, good, you got the summer mastered. Let's move on to the fall. Let's keep getting the seasons under control so that you don't feel so controlled by that. I totally can relate. It's not perfect. I have my moments, but let's keep working on it. If we change our mindset and our inside experience, especially with power, it all gets better. Okay, Maria Llewellyn, thanks for your question. She says, I often struggle with parenting and the pressure to be a perfect mother. Having grown up with an abusive mother, I find that whenever I miss the mark, even in small ways, I feel deep shame and as though I've failed the child within me. Wow. I'm saying wow for multiple reasons, which I'll get into in a second. I wonder if what I'm experiencing could be related to the pattern of symptom imperative. Okay, I'm going to get to symptom imperative in a second, Maria, but first I wanted to say I can totally identify with this. I had some things happen in my childhood that were really rough. And it has made me as a parent pretty obsessive at times about delivering a really good experience to my kids. At the same time, I've done a good job in power with myself, granting that I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be good, and I have to make sure, as best I can, that intergenerational trauma is not getting passed down, that I'm not doing any of the specific things that were done that were not good for me. And so making a mistake, that's not going to do that. I'll tell you what could is making a mistake, not apologizing about it, being defensive about it, and digging in. But if you repair, you're not going to be doing any of that. Even just the fact that you're asking these questions, that is reducing all of that intergenerational trauma. This is what I'm sure you did not get. A parent asking these questions and making sure that they address it well. Now, let's get into the idea of symptom imperative. So, obsessions are a symptom. And I think that is what's happening, Maria. I think You could move from one kind of symptom to suddenly thinking, oh, I've got this other problem. This is what doubt does in my mind. At one minute, it's like, well, maybe your work's not as good as you think it is, or maybe your marriage is not good enough, or maybe the way you're interacting with your kids and how they're growing up in the world, you're not giving them everything they need. There's all these negative maybes that doubt says. I like to use what I call the positive maybe, which is you start to get into a positive mindset about what can happen. That's power work. But in doubt work, there's these negative maybes a lot of the time, saying, maybe you're not doing this, maybe you're not doing that. And it is a form of symptom imperative. It just dances from one thing to the next. So I was at the ATNS conference last year, and there was someone speaking on obsessives and doubt. Actually, he wasn't talking about doubt. He was talking about obsessives. And somebody said to me, hey, he seemed to be saying you don't want to go into the doubt with them and combat the doubt because it'll just go in circles. And so that disagrees with you, right? And I was like, nope, it doesn't disagree with me, because I deal with the doubt that needs to be dealt with. And sometimes the doubt that needs to be dealt with is that obsessions are to be taken seriously. If we see them as a form of symptom imperative, we don't take them seriously. We don't dig into, am I being perfect or not? Because we know this is good news, kind of a ridiculous attack on ourselves. And we don't need to do that. So, Maria, that's my answer to you. Let's see what you think about that. Okay, we've got some other people who've joined us here. Luann Davison, thank you for joining us. Cody and family, thank you for joining us here. Amir, good to see you, my friend. And Michelle Kyle, thank you for joining us on Instagram as well. Okay, we've got some questions coming in from Catherine Toomer. Hi, Dr. Dan. Recently, I was reminded how helpful it is to recall my emotional themes and what action steps I have regarding each. Let me just say something about action steps. Action steps are new ways of thinking. Once we know how the thinking is going awry, we can actively put in place new thinking. That's what she's talking about, action steps. So she said, I was reminded how helpful it is to recall my emotional themes and what action steps I have regarding each. I was feeling a depression growing within me. I decided to do heavy-duty journal speak. That is Nicole Sachs, her method of doing journaling. I actually don't know it super well, but I love Nicole and her work. I have great respect for her. It's a way of accessing whatever feelings are going on underneath. In the process, I always include consideration of the columns, and I was amazed to see that no wonder I was depressed. Over the course of a couple of weeks, 3 of my emotional themes had been triggered. That helped so much. So let me just pause and say, when you see that you make sense and your symptoms make sense, then you can settle down. And a lot of times just seeing those connections really, really helps. That, along with my prayer and meditation practices, has brought me up and out of my depression. Beautiful. I still have work to do to get beyond a plateau in dealing with the OCD-related symptoms, but remembering themes and the narrative in the power column is setting me up well. Fantastic. And maybe still, I don't need to go back on medication. It's been 3 years now off medication, thanks to you. That is amazing, Catherine. I'm honored to have been a part of that journey. I hear you saying that I was very helpful in that. And I know that just from the work we've done. So often we talked about the questions you had, the worries you had, and we just kept making sense of you. And a lot of times medication is what different practitioners may offer to you when they don't know what to do with you. But the reality is you make sense and your symptoms make sense. The columns will always know what to do with you and how to offer helpful new ways of thinking. So, Catherine, thank you for sharing these wins. It's beautiful. Luann says, thank you as always. Thank you, Luann. I really appreciate the appreciation. Okay. Susan Sereno says, I had Graves' disease over 30 years ago, and now I think it was brought on by mind-body. Absolutely. When I hear Graves' disease, and there's so many of these terms, syndromes and disorders and diseases, so many of them really aren't that. The vast majority of things are mind-body. So, Susan, thank you for sharing that. I agree with you. Based on what I know about your experience, you're a classic mind-body sufferer. You're what Sarno called a goodist, always looking out for other people. You've got all the qualities. So how would it be that you're having these mind-body issues now, but you weren't then? I was having mind-body symptoms throughout my entire life, all the way back to my childhood. So I think that's really worth considering. And this is also a sign, Susan, of your doubt coming down. Okay, Beatrice. Positional vertigo, dizziness. Even if it's mind body, I don't feel I can get rid of unless I get some maneuvers done. I had this in the past once. It's quite disabling now. Although I also loathe the maneuvers, they're extremely uncomfortable. So is that doubt trigger potentially? Or do you think if I become more able to process emotionally, I can? You said, and she said I'm ambivalent. Beatrice, you don't need those maneuvers. I know a lot of people do them, and they can bring relief. But here's the way that I think about that. There's one of two reasons that people get better from doing those maneuvers. One is it could be a placebo reaction, where they just are being told it's going to help, and they do the thing that they feel like is going to help, and it's relieving just to know that help is on the way, and they get better. It also could be that mind-body experience does dislodge the crystals in some way if you're having a certain stress response, and doing that basically takes the body side of mind-body experience and fixes that on the tail end, but it doesn't fix it the main way. Now, it's not going to matter in my book, because if you do the work and you bring down the doubt, even those crystals will just go back in the right place if they're not in the right place. So I don't even make any distinction about it. I would say, yes, process this emotionally. Remember, I said that that onsets and upticks, they're the emotions column. They're emotional in nature, and they are metaphors. You're in a dizzying experience. Literally, you are off balance. And why are you off balance? You are in the thick of processing your deepest emotional traumas right now. We just talked in group today about the fact that you're basically experiencing physically how bad this felt emotionally. So let's go from there. Now we've got a couple of questions, and then we'll finish up for tonight. Susan said, that's exactly what I meant, but I didn't explain it right. You explained it beautifully as far as I'm concerned, but whatever you're wanting to explain more of, you certainly can. It sounds like I nailed it, though, in terms of how I would represent, or how we would represent those things. I think what you're referring to, though, is the fact that you're a mind-body sufferer now. That means you were a mind-body sufferer then. There's continuity. What often happens, though, is as we go through life, the older we get, the more pressure there is from an emotional, internal standpoint, especially unconsciously, to resolve these issues and live more comfortably. So the symptoms sometimes ramp up when we're about to make these big transition points and when we really want something that we're not getting. Thanks for sharing that, Susan. All right. Myra says, thanks, Dan. I keep trying to tackle level 1 doubt and even level 2. I'll get into what the levels are. So much fear of the symptoms 24/7. I attended your seminar years ago. I thought I recognized your name. It was amazing and worked for other TMS symptoms. Thank you for sharing that, Myra. So let me do a little decoding of some of these terms. I talk about level 1, 2, and 3 doubt. And I thought this was a helpful thing to do because Dr. Sarno, as wonderful as he is, he didn't even really use the term doubt. But his certainty was so helpful to me that I understood doubt. And then I understood that, he said, you've got to accept the diagnosis. That was the beginning of the doubt column right there. Dr. Sarno saying you've got to accept the diagnosis if you're going to get better. What he meant is you got to be sure. So what I came to realize as I studied this in myself and then later in others is that what I call level 1 doubt is doubt about whether the symptom's mind, body or not. And that's what most people think of when they think of doubt. When I say, do you have doubt about the symptoms? They say, no, I know it's mind, body. There can be level 2 doubt, though. I know it's mind, body, but I think my mind, body symptoms tougher to tackle than others. I get this a lot with lots of different symptoms. They'll say, if only it were just back pain, because Dr. Sarno describes that, but instead I've got this thing in my face, or I've got itching or burning, or I've got nerve stuff, or I've got a taste sensation, or I've got tinnitus. People talk about all these different things, or migraines. They talk about the symptom as if the symptom is going to be harder to tackle. And that's level 2 doubt. So that's what Myra's talking about when she mentions that. Level 3 doubt is doubt about whether you yourself have what it takes to manage this and do this. So there can be doubts about, is it mind body? Is my mind body symptom tougher to tackle than others? And can I do it myself? And there are doubts that float around all those areas. Now, TMS is what Dr. Sarno called tension myositis syndrome. That's an equivalent for mind body issues or symptoms. You'll hear lots of different terms about it. I'm kind of fond of the term TMS because of Dr. Sarno, but I'm so glad you got a lot out of the seminar and it worked for other mind-body symptoms, Myra. There's no reason we can't do this either. The only thing that's separating this symptom from the other symptoms is that your doubt is higher on this symptom. And actually, that's good news in a way. It's not obviously not good news in the experience of it, but it's good news in that we know what work needs to be done. So if you want to come see me in group, we can knock this out. Let's attack it. All right. But let me know what you need. You can also come back here next week and continue to ask questions. Okay. Karen Isaacson says, when I had an allergish cough, I love that word, it hurt my back. I got scared, also out of breath walking and talking or walking up steps. Told the doctor on the annual physical, went for an x-ray today, slightly nervous, but was working out more, less out of breath, and can swim, do pool exercises for hours, not short of breath. What Karen is experiencing, I'll say this for Karen, but it's for everybody. It is very, very common for doubt to sneak in and start to convince us that something's wrong or that we've turned a bad corner or we're not going to be fine. I've had this happen recently. One of the ways it happened was with my singing voice. My singing voice just didn't sound as good one night, and it genuinely wasn't. My muscles were tighter, whatever, and I started to worry, well, maybe it's because I'm getting older, and like I hear that people lose their notes when they get older, and then guess what I found out? I investigated, and it turns out people don't lose their upper notes for a long time. So doubt had crept in around this knowledge I had about notes. And it just started getting me to think about that. That can happen with your breathing. I just got on the basketball court after being away for a couple of weeks, and I was sluggish, but I can guarantee you a huge portion of that sluggishness was my belief. And so, Karen, what you're saying is you're seeing this happen. You know, you turned a corner. What happened there? I think it's because you were actually, in a way, maybe unconsciously, but you were working on the doubt. You know, you're well-versed enough in this system that you're kind of always working on doubt, even subconsciously, and that's good. Okay, a couple of questions left, and then we'll finish up for tonight. Sarah made it's good to see you here. I have tinnitus. I've heard some mention that it's mind-body. I have been struggling with doubt because I don't see many success stories out there, but most mind-body coaches online say it is, so I'm trying. Okay. Glad you are trying. There's lots of success. I have had direct success with tinnitus. As I said, it's never taken hold deeply for me because I keep doubt at bay. But I also have had success with people who have had it for years, and then it actually went away. What I would concentrate on, there's multiple things we could do, and this is one of those examples where I wish I could just meet with everybody because we could have a very quick exchange, and that's the kind of thing that happens in group, where I could get information on you and find out, wait, hold on, what's the nature of the symptoms? What's the nature of what you're thinking of? The columns can help me see what's happening very quickly and make recommendations. I have all kinds of recommendations about tinnitus. One, Sarah, is one that I mentioned before, which is like really basically just keep doubt in a place where you think this is just going to go away. I don't even need to pay attention to this. That's one. You could also think metaphorically, what did I not like that I heard when it started? Now, here's another one, though, that I think is going to apply better to you because it sounds like you've been having it for a while. When you've been having things for a while, especially obsessive symptoms, like where you just can't stop thinking about it, I have a rule of thumb, which is get a better obsession. And so what I would want you to do is to concentrate, and this would be power column work in my system, Sarah. I would want you thinking about something that really lights you up, gets you really excited, and I want you to get obsessed about that. And I want you to get so obsessed about it that you forget to think about tinnitus at all. Now, that would be a potential recommendation that I can make to you, but I would know more if I got to talk to you directly. In any case, consider those things. But if we bring down the doubt, we can get this done. I guarantee you, your tinnitus is mind-body. It can be reversed, and I'm happy to work with you on it. All right. I hope that is helpful. Please let me know. All right. Ani Crowfoot says, I have Achilles tendinosis, a degenerated tendon condition healed with time up to a year. Strength and stretching. I'm 7 months in. Pain comes with overuse. How do I use the columns to help heal faster? Okay. Thanks, Ani. Some of this will require ongoing discussions. As I said, we've got to keep talking about this. But my way of thinking about this is that you've got some doubt in here. And it's been built in by what you've heard from doctors. It's been built in by your personal experience with it. Overuse, in my experience, does not lead to any pain. There's only one thing overuse can lead to, and that is fatigue. If you keep using a muscle over and over and over, eventually it will get really, really tired. Could even get sore a little bit temporarily, but it does not lead to dysfunction. It doesn't lead to structural problems. So I'm hearing some doubt that's been fed to you from the medical side about what all of this is. Now, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think. So we would need to have more of a discussion about it. But you said, how do I use the columns to help them heal heal faster? In this case, this is a doubt column issue. It's been going on for longer than a couple days, so it's doubt. And we need to bring down the doubt and help you see not only are you not stuck in this, and not only is it not going to take a year, but it could go away now if we work at it. That's a starting point, Ani, but let's talk more about it. Okay, Susan said, it was about you explaining your emotional theme, so sorry for the confusion. Not a problem at all, Susan. Another advantage of group is we would have gotten past that confusion in a millisecond, but here we can sometimes have lag time. Okay, Christy says, I'm scheduled for both hip replacement for dysplasia. 3 chiropractors and 3 board-certified orthopedic surgeons said I need surgery. The balls of my hips are not round. They're flat. Can hip dysplasia be TMS? Okay. So again, TMS is what Dr. Sarno called mind-body issues. So I'll say this. First thing is I'm not a medical doctor, so we know that. But I do consult with mind-body medical doctors in the field all the time. And this is one I'd want to ask them about to find out. Now, listen, if the balls of your hips had disintegrated, they weren't there at all, then in that case, sometimes people do need surgery. But I have never heard of the balls of your hips being flat requiring surgery. This is starting to have the scent of TMS. It does. So you're going to have, there's going to be many people who will have been diagnosed with hip dysplasia, and it's going to turn out that it was actually mind body. So what I would suggest is that we get this checked out with a mind body doctor who can weigh in much better about this. They're the ones who are going to know for sure about that. But I've seen all kinds of diagnoses turn out to not be correct. What happens with medical doctors who don't know about mind body issues is they make a diagnosis based on their best guess. And often they're just dead wrong, or they're chasing a red herring, And so this does sound to me like it really could be that, and that you won't need the surgeries. Now, again, I will note I'm not a medical doctor, so I would want you to get checked out by a mind body doctor, because you've already gotten checked out by 3 board certified orthopedic surgeons. But it is amazing how even these incredibly well-trained doctors, or supposedly well-trained doctors anyway, they don't know about mind-body issues. So I can't make guarantees one way or another, but I would say your case sounds very worth checking out as a mind-body issue. If you would like, get in touch with me, dan@crushingdoubt.com. I can put you on the path to talking to one of the trusted mind-body doctors in the field, somebody like Dr. Howard Schubiner, who can help us figure that out. And then you can make a really informed decision. I will also say this for you, and just as a point of hope, even if you have to go through with the surgery, you're going to be fine either way, because surgery would address any physical issue that needs to be addressed, and then you'll heal, or everything else is mind body. You win either way. But I would say let's get this checked out and see if this could be mind body. All right. I hope that is helpful, Christy. I'm very hopeful for you. I'm extremely hopeful for you in the long run, no matter what. I'm happy to help either way. Luann Davison says, mind body has a component to all conditions. I absolutely agree with that. If you think about it, people who are in comas, for example, they don't have a lot of symptoms from what we can tell. Maybe it's hard to know what's going on there, but this is something that I've always wondered about. I don't think that people in comas are getting violently physically ill, because their minds aren't really on in that way. So the mind is incredibly powerful. If your body can do it, the mind can use it. And head to toe, we've got all kinds of mind-body symptoms, multiple times a day. It's the human condition. The job with the columns is to make sure none of it is chronic, that we can control acute symptoms, and that we've got the best relationship with ourselves in the way that the symptoms are telling us we need. All right. It has been a pleasure being here with you. I will be back here next week at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Keep the questions coming. Make sure you get your questions answered to your full satisfaction. Even with me, I may answer a question. If it's not to your full satisfaction, then ask another question. Keep it coming. All right, guys. It is a pleasure. I wish you all well, and let's be in touch as needed.